Well, everyone, thank you for having me today. My name is Eza Israel. I'm the CEO of U.S. Financial Alliance. And today's speech is going to be discussing leverage and how it's used to build a business. Now, let's start off very simply with the definition of what is leverage. Does anybody know? Feel free to interact, guys. Anybody? No? What you got?
So if you have something of value, then you can sell that stake in that to others so that they can fund your operations.
Okay. One type of leverage, absolutely. But in its most basic and simplistic definition of what leverage is simply the application of either power or force being applied to a lever to accomplish a new goal that otherwise would be impossible without that lever in place. So I'm going to show you guys a really simple version of this, and it should click almost instantly. If my goal was to lift this desk, and I came over this way and grabbed it here and tried to lift, I can do it, but it's challenging. Reason being, my center mass, my big tummy, is over the middle, and therefore I don't have the leverage needed to lift the table easily. But if I walk around to the side of the table and come this way, now lifting the table becomes very simple, very easy. Reason being, I've adjusted my angle to create a brand new leverage point, all right? Now, leverage as a term has several definitions. You mentioned one, which was good, and that's more, when you're trying to sell a product, right? When you're trying to start that type of a business, right? However, a more broad definition of what leverage actually is the ability to influence a system or an environment in a way that multiplies the outcome of one's efforts without a corresponding increase in the consumption of resources. Now, I just sounded like Webster's dictionary. Does anybody know what I just said in plain English? Any takers? Anyone? No? Okay. Basically what this means is, can I step into this room in front of all of you and then emote what it is I'm feeling, what it is I'm thinking, and how I approach my life, my business, in such a way that it'll not only inspire all of you, but it'll motivate you to take action and actually execute and try what it is that I'm saying. In order to do this, I have to actually captivate you in some way. So I'm going to pull you in with a little bit of backstory on me and where my understanding of leverage began. And then we'll guide that into how I started to apply it in real world application. So first, I got my bachelor's, if you will, in physical leverage as a football player in high school. Okay? As you can see, I'm not the smallest guy in the room. So I was actually an offensive lineman playing center. And that taught me a lot about physical force. We were required to be power lifters. We were required to be strong. And we were required to exert very specific amounts of leverage in very specific situations. Now, as big as you see me today, in my position, I was always the little guy. But yet I was still able to be the captain of my team and lead them forward because of the fact that I understood my strengths, understood my weaknesses, and I understood how to apply leverage to my opponents. I then proceeded to get my first doctorate in physical leverage by doing judo. And that taught me how to apply leverage while standing. But that wasn't enough, because what happens if the fight goes down to the ground, right? And that's where I started studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And that's where I got my double doctorate in physical leverage. And believe you me, when somebody that's your size or half your size or double your size is applying leverage and applying pressure to you, if you don't know how to adjust to that, you're going to have some very, very serious problems. Now, that said, leverage in business also has several different definitions. In business, the term of leverage is how a business acquires either its assets or its growth capital, okay? Now, an asset can be something like what our colleague here said in his presentation. It could be the employees, the people that you work with, the relationships that you've created and you've leveraged. But it could just as easily be the way you manage yourself and the way that you manage your own time. Now, to give you guys kind of a scope of how simple this can be, I thought it would be kind of a fun exercise for us to have a physical demonstration of leverage and how it's used. And to do this, I'd like to bring up my distinguished colleague, Prince Lethbridge. He is an amazing human being, and over these past few years has become a great friend. So Prince, if you could please, we're gonna pull up a chair, and what I'd like to do with you, if you could you first help me turn the table? Let's turn the table this way and bring it vertically here. So this way everybody has a clear line of sight as to what it is that we're gonna do. Okay, and if you could, Prince, grab a seat. Oh, that works. Grab a seat, facing me. All right. Has anyone ever seen an arm wrestling match? Show of hands. All right, cool. I have a childhood movie that is really cheesy, but it was one of those great movies as a kid you remember. Anyone ever seen Over the Top? There we go. Okay, one of my favorite movies as a kid. Now, this movie was simply Sylvester Stallone trying to get his kid by winning a arm wrestling competition so he could win a new truck and start a new business. Now, he was one of the smaller guys in the field, and everybody else looked like Prince. So he had a really, large task to accomplish. So we're gonna kind of apply that principle here. So if you look at me and Prince, okay, we're both big guys. If you had to place a bet, let's say you had to bet $1,000 on this interaction, who wins between me and Prince in an arm wrestling match? What do you think?
Prince.
Prince, I agree with you 1,000%. All day, every day, Prince destroys me. Why?
He said he was.
Well, that's one. But beyond that, he's larger, he has more muscle mass, and he has more strength, okay? So if we were to now engage, and I try to take Prince on, every time I try to apply pressure, he's gonna apply a counter pressure, and his counter pressure substantially stronger than mine, right? Now, how can I apply a different form of leverage to potentially give myself an advantage here? Any thoughts?
Get a chair and sit down so you can be even with him.
Okay, not a bad approach, but if I'm seated in a chair, now we're at the equal leveraging point, and we already know he's already got an advantage. So now I've put myself at a disadvantage. I have a slight advantage being standing, but even still, my opponent is so much stronger than me, it won't make sense. Now what if, let's say for example, I cheated, okay? Let's say when Prince got here to sit down, I put a second hand on top, and I'm pulling and I'm pulling. Notice, look at this, I'm literally pulling him with me, but he's still so powerful and so strong that toe to toe, I can never defeat him. There's no way I can create enough physical leverage to win. Does that mean that I should give up and not even try? No. The simple answer is I have to figure out a way to create a new form of leverage. Now, how about I try something very simple? Prince, let's get started. How about I just go up to him, look him dead in the eye, we're friends, we're good friends, and I say to him, Prince, could you do me a favor and let me beat you? What do you think?
Ain't gonna happen.
Exactly. And this is 100% true in every business interaction you're gonna have. The people you're competing with, if they are smart, which is a very small percentage of the population, okay, are actually gonna work with you, right? Because your competition understands that by working together, you can all succeed. But the reality of it is, most people are more selfish than that, and what they'll do is they'll try to overpower you, especially when you're the little guy, okay? So, in this instance, what is our goal? His goal is to get my hand down here. My goal, in theory, is to get his hand down here. But at the end of it all, what is the overall goal? The goal is for someone to win this interaction, one person or the other has to get their opponent's hand to the table, okay? So, if we go on and we push it, and then at the last second I slide my hand out, whose hand reached the table first? His. So by default, I've achieved my goal. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't elegant, but goal was achieved. And this in business is super important. You could have the most well thought out plan possible with the best team possible and yet still fail miserably, right? Right? You talked about it in your speech. And it's the most weird way to present that information, because when you read about this in every book tells you, yes, if you have the perfect business plan and the perfect execution strategy and the perfect capitalization and everything is working just right, there's no way you could fail, right? But then you get into the real world. My favorite short adaptation to this statement was said by Mike Tyson. Everybody has a great plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that's what happens to you every single day in business, okay? Now, in order to be successful, we have to understand what types of leverage can we leverage and benefit ourselves in our business and in our lives and in our relationships as well. All right, so for this portion, I'd like to thank Prince for his awesome contribution, and you could go back and take your seat, and I'll continue this part on my own. So, let's give him a round of applause, guys. All right. So I've tried to simplify it for you guys today and brought it down to 5 simple areas of leverage, if you will, that we want to focus on. First is leveraging your time. All right. I'm going to give you guys a real life example of how I leverage time. All right. Today, believe it or not, I am the world's worst procrastinator. Okay? I do everything at the last possible minute, including preparing for today's speech. I jotted down all of my thoughts about a half an hour before arriving today. And yet, I'm still able to provide you guys an effective speech, I feel. You could disagree, but that's your choice. The reality of it is, the reason I was able to do that, guys, is because while my wonderful girlfriend Nicole and I were on vacation last week, every free moment I had, I sat down and I reflected. And as I remunerate each evening and I reflect on what has to be done for that day, the next month, the next week, I knew I was going to be coming here. So in preparation, I thought about a few minutes each night exactly what I was going to be talking to you about today. In doing this, I accumulated multiple segments of 5 to 10 minute increments that added up to several hours worth of preparation. And the reality of it is, it was simply done by stacking my time. Very simple concept. The next thing is to leverage your achievements. Now, what do I mean by this? I, in school, graduated summa cum laude with a chemistry degree because I was supposed to be a surgeon. That was my original goal. That's the path my parents set me on. Now, unfortunately, you know the expression, when people plan, God laughs? Well, in my case, this couldn't have been more true. I had some personal issues at that time. My mom got really sick and I couldn't progress and I couldn't continue that path. I needed to immediately start working and start supporting my family. So I did just that. I leveraged what I learned in school, not the chemistry information, the knowledge I had, but the skills I had gained in presenting in front of an audience. And I figured, what is the quickest way I can reapply this and make tons of money? I was like, I got to sell something financial related. And I got into the mortgage space. And back then it was the wild, wild west. You know, before the collapse, everybody was making money in mortgages. And I was one of those people. Now, after that, the third thing that we want to think about is leveraging your connections and your relationships. Now, you start off thinking, first and foremost, about your closest interpersonal relationships, your friends and your family. But learning how to navigate those waters can be tricky, because if you have a supportive family, it gives you a false sense of security. And if you have a non-supportive family, it gives you a lot of self-doubt and self-confidence issues. So navigating a balance can be a little bit tricky. But in business, it's just as important, because you have to be able to leverage your relationships with other companies, other entrepreneurs, other agents, to be able to apply an effective strategy of working together. If you can't do that, if you can't put yourself in someone else's shoes and allow for you to relate to them in a way that they'll understand what you're trying to accomplish, you'll never be able to actually get ahead. So you need to be able to consider the other side's point of view and then find a way to navigate to a midpoint. This leads me to the fourth version of leverage, which is leveraging your talents and your skills. Everyone has something that they were meant to do. Some people don't figure it out until they're in their 40s or 50s. Some people never figure it out. Some people figure it out when they're 5, 6, 7 years old. Wherever it is that you are in your life, wherever you are when you figured out what your purpose was, it's up to you to learn how to leverage that skill set and make it work for you. So if you feel comfortable in front of a room of people, then you should be in front of a room of people. That's going to be the key to your personal success. And then beyond that, the last step is to leverage your education. Now, when I say leverage your education, I'm not talking about go to college, get a specific degree, and therefore, since you have this degree, you now have leverage. That is not at all the case. In this country especially, it is by far the biggest farce. And the proof of this, the proof is in the pudding. If you look at the wealthiest people in our country, with the exception of the big three, okay, which everybody knows, Bergs, Zucks, and all those types of guys, which were super smart, the majority of the wealthy people in this country, honestly, at best, C students. Or way worse. Or really just borderline, I'll be honest, just, excuse my French, but idiots. And yet still have achieved large amounts of financial success. And I agree with our previous speaker. Success isn't measured by how much money you have. It's measured by how much leverage you've created to benefit yourself, obviously, because that's your primary goal, but also those around you. Because you can leverage yourself by putting yourself into a position to improve the environment around you, or you can leverage yourself unethically, where you're the sole winner of that leverage and everyone else around you loses. Personally, I prefer the first option. I like to help everyone around me, and by uplifting those around me, I can then be uplifted with them. Does that make sense? All right, now this leads me, guys, into what we did in our business to create different aspects of leverage. I started off in the mortgage space. This led me into deep analysis, and I was able to work on the stock exchange, analyzing mortgage securities. Then, when the market collapsed, I had to pivot. I had to adjust. I got into the debt space. And then in learning what the needs were of the clients that I was servicing, I was really able to realize that if I had any hope of success at all, I had to figure out how to leverage the relationships I had with the different lenders, banks, credit agencies that I was working with on a daily basis and create not a new product. We weren't trying to reinvent the wheel, but what we were trying to do is to create a platform that could apply to every financial need a customer or a client could have. And that's exactly what we set out to do, and we did. So we started off focusing on one simple category, and then from there built out a series of 14 different services, all of which work cohesively together as one solid unit. And the way that that was able to be accomplished is because each service had an interlocking piece to the one beyond it. Now, to kind of summarize and put into a conclusive, simple understanding of why I feel this topic of leverage is so important, I want you to think about 3 simple words: living, survival, and business. Living in and of itself is a game of survival, but surviving in business is really living. What this really means, very simply put, is that if you can survive in your business and lead your life on your own terms, now you're really living, because you're living with no limitations other than your own efforts. And this is what I'd like to leave you all with today. I implore all of you to apply these skill sets. Leverage your talents, leverage your skills, leverage your time. And then beyond that, apply it to everything that you do in life. And I guarantee you, you'll accomplish amazing levels of success. Thank you.